Welcome to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about something pretty emotionally difficult for some people. Well, difficult for everybody because, trust me, I've been there. And that is getting rejected from law school. The decision that you didn't want. Before we begin, of course, please note that this channel does not provide or replace legal or other professional advice. If you need assistance, please contact a qualified attorney where you live or an appropriate professional. This channel is further from my personal experience only, and it is your responsibility to do your own research and ensure that the information provided is accurate, adequate, and applicable to you, your jurisdiction, your situation in your law school. If your law school has other guidelines, please follow those specific guidelines. It is your responsibility to do your own work and put in the effort by succeeding using what is best for you. This channel is further not intended as attorney advertisement. All right. Before we begin, please note that I have been there. I have been rejected from law school. Every law school that I applied to twice over. That's not fun. It hurts, it stings, it's devastating. But here I'm going to cover what I did and what worked for me to try and turn rejection into acceptance, which is basically what I did. As I mentioned in the previous video, which was 5 tips to survive the wait, rejection is a very real possibility. So now the waiting process is over and the decisions start to trickle in. And you will get your status again in whatever way you are informed you will get it on your law school application or in an email that they send you. For those of you who get either emails or physical letters, the format of the letter will pretty much go something like this. Dear applicant's name, thank you for your interest in whatever law school's name. We've received a lot of great candidates this year. After careful consideration, we are unfortunately unable to offer you a place at this time, or we regret to inform you that, we regret to inform you that we cannot offer you a place. Whatever it is, the message is the same. And in a matter of seconds, you think that all of your hard work has pretty much come to nothing. Now, rejection from law school, I find, is more painful than rejection from college because for law school, you have to pretty much keep your grades up in college. You have to intern. You may have to take the LSAT, whatever you had to do to get in if your law school requires it. But it's hard work to keep up this, good status and pretty much meet all these requirements for these different law schools. So now, what do? Well, the first thing you pretty much want to do is to allow yourself to feel whatever it is you feel. Whether it's angry, whether it's sad, whether it's disappointed. And you want to give yourself some time to process this because, we can't just have in life one sucker punch after another and just act like nothing happened. And a rejection is pretty much a punch in the gut. I've had to do it in 2 application cycles. And when I was rejected, the first time I applied to a lot of law schools from 7 different law schools, I'm thinking, how can this be? None of them want me? And it's humiliating. So what do? So for about a week, I gave myself the chance to, as I said, and I'm repeating this here, feel what I felt. I did things I enjoyed. I hung out with friends. I had my favorite foods. It was just a time for me to decompress and de-stress before continuing. Now, when after the 7th day of this is when the hard work really begins for you if you really want to go to law school the next year. And in these upcoming days, you need to have some pretty difficult conversations with yourself. And again, everything I'm telling you here, I've done. And these difficult conversations don't necessarily mean the conversation of whether you would be able to go to law school, whether you deserve law school, because that's not even a question. If you want to go to law school, these are not the difficult conversations you have. The first conversation you might want to have is about your schools. Look on their websites. Are you really able to meet all of the requirements for each and every law school? Or are some law schools, filled with too many requirements that you just, are unable to meet for some reason? And you need to basically write down all of the requirements for different schools, and a lot of them might be the same, some may be different. And you need to meet most, if not all of them. I would say all of them, just to be on the safe side. Although you can have a school that is, a little bit of a reach and apply, there's no harm in trying again. But you have to be prepared for the possibility, again, that if the school is a bit of a reach for you, then you can have the same result the next time, even though you've changed, for at least that school. For those of you who were rejected from schools that you really wanted to go to, but were accepted to some of your backup schools, have a conversation with yourself about why you really don't want to go to those schools. What is it about them that you really dislike? And decide, can you apply to your dream school next year? I'm not sure if I would advise it or not. I've never done that. But if not, you can also use the services of an admissions consultant, admissions counselors. Again, I can't speak on that because I've never tried that. But there, it is a possibility. The next conversation you need to have with yourself after you made the list of requirements from those schools' websites is where you went wrong. And this is a hard thing to do because it forces you to really look at yourself and really take stock and take ownership of your weaknesses. It really forces you to see, what did I do wrong? What can I do better? When that's done, you need to start to try and work on those same weaknesses. Just know one thing, and this is something that I've told myself. I've told myself that if I did not make changes, I would not get into law school. And I've actually learned that lesson very well in law school the second time that I applied. I did not make a lot of significant changes. And even if I did, there was one thing which was holding me back, and I didn't make a change on that, so I knew why I had been rejected from law school. The next thing you should do, and the next thing I did, was take a look at my application and compare it to the requirements of the school. What was I missing? So the first thing I looked at was my GPA. My GPA was lower than what some schools wanted, but about where one of the schools should be or required. Again, I've never done this, but you can possibly ask your law school, or even better, maybe an admissions consultant or counselor, or do some internet research. Again, research is important, on getting a second degree if your GPA is too low, or whether if you enhance other things, it could in some way make up for your GPA. The next thing I looked at was my resume. Did I have a lot of experience on my resume? Could I use more? What did I put in my application for experience? I learned that I needed more experience based on what I put. So I pretty much got a paralegal certificate. I did an internship in the years leading up to my second application. The next thing I looked at, because back then my law school required the LSAT, is my LSAT score. Whether that score realistically met the requirements of these schools that I applied to. My score did not. And so I took it again and again and again. And of course, the law schools will tell you, or even the law school study, the LSAT study programs will tell you, you should try and take the LSAT one time and one time only. I took the LSAT 5 times. Yes, 5. And what others thought was just really, I'm not going to say it wasn't of concern to me, but I wanted to show them that I was determined to get in, and eventually I did. So make sure that when you take the LSAT a second time, if your law school requires it and your score is not what it should be, the admissions committee wants to see a significant improvement in LSAT scores, not just by 1 or 2 points, but significant improvement. For those law schools that do not require it, again, you can inquire from your law school admissions or from accurate sources as to whether or not an LSAT, if you took it, would help you if you had a low GPA or you had a weakness in some other area. But you need to study for it. You need to do what I did and invest and put in the time to study, because that's not easy, this test. Or as I did, invest in a good LSAT prep course and even some tutoring and study, study, study. So from this, you're probably getting that the admissions committee does not want to see the same application that you handed in last time. It wants to see something different. The next thing that the admissions committee wants to see is a new personal statement. I know it's annoying to write different personal statements for different schools, but each admissions committee wants to see that you want to get into that school, that you want that particular school and not just a general thing that you write for every school. And that's honestly what I thought. So they want to see a different personal statement than the one you had last time. So make sure that you do that. The next thing that we're going to talk about is something called an addendum. And an addendum is basically the document that you would attach to the application back in my day, that would explain anything else that the admissions committee should know about you. And this would include things like, any weaknesses that you have and why you had those weaknesses. If you use an addendum the first time, or even the second, take a look at that addendum. What weaknesses do you have? How can I improve on these weaknesses? In my third application, and my final time, the third time's the charm in my third set of applications, I did not use an addendum. Because an addendum can go either way, and I found that using an addendum the first few times didn't work, but you have to make your own judgment at that time. So just use it as a tool for you, but not necessarily something that you would actually add. What the admissions committee wants to see overall is a good faith effort to improve. So it's basically the application that says you 2.0. And in my case, me 3.0. Because maybe in my case, the admissions committee saw in certain schools that I had improved but not yet met those requirements from one application to the other application to the other application. And I'm hoping that part of the reason why I get accepted the third time was because the admissions committee saw that I wanted to get in. The admissions committee saw that I was determined to work hard. And the admissions committee saw that I was willing to put in the effort, the time, and take the risk of applying again. The next thing should be pretty much self-explanatory, and I apologize for mentioning it here, but it's basically honesty. In your applications, you should have two questions, not near each other, but two questions. The first is, or not two questions, but basically a question and a certification statement. The certification statement, which I saw practically on every single application I had for law school, was something like, I certify that the information here is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge, and something about I understand, and they go on to list a whole slew of consequences for what happens if you're not honest on an application or if there are any discrepancies on the application. So the question that we're talking about here is the one on the application where it says, have you applied to law school previously? And if you have, what was your, which law schools? Have you applied to this law school? Did you get admitted to any of the law schools, including this one? And in my case, twice, my answer was no, I did not get admitted, and yes, I applied. It is very, very important that you are honest here. Even if you might think it looks better for you to say no, you have never applied, it won't. Trust me on this, it won't. The admissions committee is probably going to look and see if you applied before, and if they find that you have applied but you've said no on your application, that, despite all of the changes that you made, despite all of the hard work that you put into this, is going to lead to pretty severe consequences, the least of which is rejection from the law school. So, honesty in the legal profession, and they even told us this repeatedly throughout law school, so I'm just repeating this here, honesty is a cornerstone of the legal profession for attorneys. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about, which is somewhat lighthearted, but not really, is being waitlisted. I was waitlisted by my dream school. Being waitlisted is not a rejection, but it is not an acceptance. As I mentioned in a previous video, which was the tips to survive the wait, it is a runner-up. So you basically almost meet the requirements that they're looking for, but not quite. So you're put on a list, and if someone can't make it or decides to drop out at the last minute, you may be chosen. So you're on the waiting list. Although a lot of people are, so it really is, it depends how many people drop out or not. Or maybe you may be chosen along with others if one person drops out. We don't know. But the point is that a waiting list result does not guarantee your acceptance. So you need to have a backup school that you have been accepted to that you are gonna be ready to attend. And you need to consider the deadline of that particular school that you've been accepted to respond to their offer. So if you hadn't heard from the school that you've been waitlisted for, by the time the deadline rolls around, you need to be ready to apply, or not to apply, but to accept the other school's offer even before the deadline for that school and even before you are called for the waitlisted school. In my case, unfortunately, the school that I was waitlisted for had pretty much 100% attendance, which is unheard of. They've never happened except for that year. So I was in another school, which I'm happy with. One last tip for this particular situation is when you're applying to law school for the second time or third time or however many times, which is fine, but when you're reapplying, try and apply early. Try and apply way before the deadline, because a lot of these schools are rolling admission. So if you have been rejected, get everything ready. Try to do what you can as early as possible so that you can apply as early as possible. So you have everything ready early. I hope that this video helps, and I hope that if you're applying to law school, I wish you good luck, but I hope you never need it, this video. I want you to get accepted. But if you do get rejected, please note that's not the end for you. And try and turn your rejection into acceptance. Thank you very much.